This is Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. David Brownstein. I decided to do a second part to the video that I did reporting the Gallup data on the emotional experiences of Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic. There are two reasons why I thought I would do a second video. The first is to provide a little bit of context to the information that I talked about in the previous video. Also, I thought I would give some more information about the breakdown of who is feeling more and less happy, more and less worried, more and less lonely, and more and less bored during this COVID-19 pandemic. So let me start with the first part. I talked about how in the most recent polling period, Gallup found that 72% of Americans reported that in the day prior to being asked, they were happy a lot of the day. 47% of Americans reported that in the day prior to being asked, they were worried a lot of the day. So the question then becomes, how close is that to what's typical? Taking a look at some of the previous reporting data that Gallup did, we find that when it comes to happiness, they had done some research that found that 86% of Americans in their most recent poll reported that they were either fairly happy or very happy. That compares with 72% that are currently reporting a lot of happiness. Now, it's important to understand and to appreciate that the questions that the research participants were asked seem to have been slightly different, and that could account for some of the disparity, some of the gap between the 72% that are currently reporting happiness and the 86% that generally report that they're fairly happy or very happy. Nevertheless, it does seem like it's a fairly significant difference, and it's probably safe to say that Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic are experiencing somewhat less happiness than they normally do. When looking at the data on worry, we find actually something quite interesting, which is that in the most recent data that was collected by Gallup prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, or I should say at least in the most recent data reported by Gallup prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, they reported that 45% of Americans had generally report that they worried a lot in the day before being asked. Now, it seems from that research that the question asked then and the question asked in the current research and polling was very similar, if not the same, suggesting that during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, Americans have almost returned to normal in terms of their level of worry, where it's declined from an initial spike of up to 59% of Americans who were experiencing a lot of worry down to 47%, which is very close to the 45% of Americans that are usually worried. Again, this is good news in the sense that our level of worry has sort of returned to its normal, even though you might say that 45 or 47% of people experiencing a lot of worry is still quite a lot. And that's very true, and why another reason why access and engagement in mental health treatment is so important. Now, to switch gears a little bit and look at some of the breakdown of the emotional experiences among different segments of our society during the COVID-19 pandemic. This data looks at the most recent reporting period, which was between April 27th and May 10th, 2020. During that time, if we look at income level, they broke income level down by three categories. Those who earn under $36,000 a year, households under $36,000, households that earn over $90,000 per year, and those who earn between $36,000 and $90,000. Interestingly, when it came to happiness, they found that only the income group that earned the lowest was significantly lower than average, where those under 36,000, just a little more than half of them reported a lot of happiness, whereas those who earned over 36,000, more than 3/4 of them reported a lot of happiness. With worry, the findings were similar, where those who earned under 36,000 seemed to worry the most, about 58%. Those who earned over 90,000 worried less, 48%. But interestingly, those in the middle bracket between $36,000 and $90,000 of income, they worried the least. Only 44% of those reported a lot of worry. Looking at marital status is another very interesting breakdown of society, where they look at those who are married, those who are divorced, those who are single or never married, and those who are widowed. And the findings there were also quite interesting. When it came to happiness, those who were married and widowed reported the greatest amount of happiness, almost identical. The married group 77% and the widowed group 76% reported experiencing a lot of happiness, whereas the other two groups, the divorced and the single, substantially less, where they reported 62 and 61% respectively, a full 15 percentage points of less happiness than the married and widowed. When it came to worried, this was also interesting, where those who were single and those who were divorced, 50% reported that they had experienced a lot of worry. That's a full half. Whereas among the married population, 45% reported a lot of worry, and the least amount of worry was reported by those who had been widowed. Only 38% were reporting a lot of worry during this pandemic time. When it came to boredom, the numbers were somewhat different. When it came to boredom, those who were divorced, as well as those who were married, reported the least amount of boredom. Only 39% said that they were bored a lot of the day yesterday. The most amount of boredom was among those who were single and those who were widowed. 46 and 45% respectively reported a lot of boredom. And finally, loneliness, again, quite interestingly, the most loneliness was reported by those who were single and divorced. 36 and 35% of those groups respectively reported a lot of loneliness. Only 26% of those who were widowed reported a lot of loneliness, and the married group was the least lonely of all, reporting only 17% who said that they were lonely a lot. I think that there's a lot to be made of this information, and one thing I think that we can all take away from it is that when we look around at other people during this time, going through what we're going through, obviously in their own unique way, we might see people who are happier than us, people who are less happy, people who seem to be experiencing more or less anxiety about their situation, and people who are reacting and responding emotionally in a variety of different ways. And I think the takeaway here is that there are a lot of factors that go into how we respond emotionally, including how much financial stress do we have? How much social support do we have? I didn't talk about the breakdown between men and women, but there are differences between how men and women experience these emotions. And so ultimately, to realize that not everyone is experiencing this the same, and no two people are quite alike. It's important to be able to offer support and compassion and help where possible to those that we come in contact with, those that we encounter who are struggling with the circumstances that this pandemic has presented them with. Thank you for watching. I hope you will like this video, perhaps consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, where I will be putting out more video over time. You can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Dr. D. Brownstein, and on my website at www.drdbrownstein.com. Until next time, have a good day.